Hello my friends, today I've decided to compare two main types of digital cameras, the DSLRs or digital single lens reflection cameras and mirrorless cameras. This video is mainly intended for those who are deciding what should they buy as their first serious camera and those who are thinking about switching from one type of camera to another. These assumptions will be generalized so that I can compare two large and diversified types of cameras, so please keep that in mind. In the description, I've made a list of some DSLRs and mirrorless cameras that are in my opinion worth considering for the first more serious camera. As the name suggests, the fundamental difference between the DSLR and mirrorless camera is that the DSLR uses a system of mirrors to reflect the light coming through the lens into the viewfinder, where you can basically see what the lens sees. The digital sensor is located behind the mirror, and the mirror is only lifted up to expose the sensor to the light while taking picture or when you enter the so-called live view mode, where the DSLR is acting basically like the mirrorless camera. In the mirrorless camera, on the other hand, there is no mirror. The sensor is located behind the lens, and you can see the frame as image that is being projected right from the sensor, either into your electronic viewfinder or on the screen. So here you see what the sensor sees through the lens. So the viewfinder in mirrorless camera is basically a little high resolution screen. So what are the advantages of these designs? The advantages of the DSLR are that with purely optical viewfinder you have theoretically unlimited resolution of the picture. Electronic viewfinders in mirrorless cameras are still displays, so they have set resolution and also some refresh rate that can potentially cause lag or lack of smoothness, although electronic viewfinders in mirrorless cameras have been significantly improved over the last couple of years, and especially high-end mirrorless cameras have very high resolution with large magnification. For example, Panasonic G9 has 3.69 million dot display with 0.83 times magnification and 120 Hz refresh rate. Honestly, I would take the electronic viewfinder in Panasonic G9 over optical viewfinder in any DSLR. Unfortunately, in cheaper and older mirrorless cameras, the viewfinders are not that great. Also, the big difference is that with mirrorless, you see not only the framing in the viewfinder, but also the exposure. So when you change the aperture, ISO or white balance, you can see how it affects your image. So with mirrorless, what you see is what you get. Whereas with DSLR, you see the same picture in the viewfinder regardless of the settings. If you are used to shooting with a smartphone, which is basically a mirrorless camera, the DSLR is kind of a step backwards and you have three options how to expose the picture. You can use the metering in camera and some of the semi-auto modes like aperture priority to let the camera set the exposure. This is what I recommend to do most of the time, since the metering or semi-automatic exposure works well in modern DSLRs. I'm sure that someone in comments will try to appear smart by writing that you absolutely need to use manual because that is what professionals do, but that is of course nonsense. The second thing that you can do is to estimate the exposure, take a picture, see what it looks like and adjust the settings, or you can use light meter. If you don't know what a light meter is, then you don't need to know. On some DSLRs, there is some kind of exposure preview when you use the live mode, so we shoot with the screen. But on entry-level Nikon DSLRs, for example, it is a pain to use and it doesn't work very well. Canon works much better here. Regarding the image quality, that is not directly affected by the type of the camera. These two cameras, Sony A6500, which is mirrorless, and Nikon D5500, which is DSLR, actually use the same sensor made by Sony, and there are only minor differences in image quality caused by image processing. General advantage of the DSLRs is the battery life. DSLRs don't need to run the display to show you the frame, so they consume very little power in comparison to mirrorless, but that only applies for shooting with viewfinder. As soon as you switch to live view, the screen needs to be powered and the battery life goes rapidly down. If you want to shoot a video with your camera, you can only do so using the live view on the DSLR, which means that it is not possible to use the viewfinder while shooting video on DSLR, whilst on the mirrorless, you can use electronic viewfinder just like if you are taking stills. Another point we're discussing is the size. The whole system of mirrors in DSLR takes up a lot of space inside of the camera, which means that the DSLRs are generally bigger or bulkier. Here we have Nikon D5500, Nikon's smallest DSLR, and Sony A6500. They have same sensor, but as you can see, the D5500 is much bigger, even though that A6500 packs much more advanced features like in-body image stabilization, 4K video, better processing power, shutter capable of shooting 11 frames per second, and so on. The last thing that I would like to talk about in this video are the lenses. The main difference here is the distance between the sensor and the mount of the lens, known as a flange distance. This distance is obviously much shorter on mirrorless cameras, so lenses for mirrorless have to be designed differently than the lenses for DSLRs. Generally, there is more lenses available for DSLRs because these are longer on the market and these lenses are usually cheaper for the same reason, but that is definitely not the rule. Mirrorless lens selection is catching up and there are also more budget options available. The advantage of mirrorless is that you can use an adapter like the Sigma MC11 to compensate for that flange distance and use DSLR lenses like this outstanding Sigma 18-35mm f1.8 on mirrorless camera. Regarding the price, some really good DSLR cameras like Nikon D5500 or even D3400 can be had just for a couple of hundreds of dollars or euros, and you can get amazing image quality out of those cameras, but there are also some reasonably priced budget-friendly mirrorless cameras available like Sony A5100 and A6000 or Panasonic G9, and also some reasonably priced lenses for mirrorless like Sigma DN series. To sum up, the mirrorless systems are generally a more modern approach to making a digital camera. They have distinctive advantages like exposure preview available at all time, smaller size, availability to use adapted lenses, and so on. DSLRs are still suitable for some users. Nowadays it is definitely the technically less advanced group of cameras, but shooting with DSLR still has specific, let's say, flavor that some users prefer. I personally prefer mirrorless because of the reasons stated in this video, but it is always important to choose the camera that is the best for your specific needs. So that's it for this video. Thank you for watching. I hope that you liked this video and that you found it to be useful. Stay tuned for more videos and maybe consider subscribing if you don't want to miss my future content. I appreciate your feedback in form of thumbs up or thumbs down. If you would like to ask anything or share your opinion, please do so in the comment section, and see you next time.